She's going through hormonal fluctuations. He is too. And those things often collide. Men's testosterone starts decreasing as early as their 30s.
What is a first step that somebody should try to evaluate? Is it a sexual issue or a relationship issue? Because I think the lines get so blurred.
I might ask you to give me a hug, or I might ask you to cuddle with me on the couch. And tomorrow it might be something completely different. Roll with me, because we're going to get there together.
Today's episode is a conversation every woman in midlife needs to hear. Because here's the truth. We talk about perimenopause, we talk about hormones, but we rarely talk about these transitions and how they impact desire, intimacy, connection in long-term relationships. And for so many women, the story sounds like this. I love my partner, but somewhere between kids, career, stress, hormones, we lost the spark. And that's why I invited Alisa DiLorenzo to join us here today. She's the co-host of the top marriage podcast, One Extraordinary Marriage, where she and her husband, Tony, have candid, sometimes hilarious, always real conversations about intimacy, connection, and keeping passion alive in long-term relationship. For over a decade, Alisa has been coaching couples around the world, helping them rebuild emotional and sexual intimacy, not by adding more pressure, but by bringing back curiosity, playfulness, and intentional connection. In this episode, we'll explore how desire shifts in midlife and why it's not your fault, how to tell if it's a sexual issue or a relationship issue, and the number one intimacy killer in long-term relationships, and how to bring back playfulness when things feel routine. Because intimacy isn't about perfection, it's about presence, connection, and choosing each other again. And as Alisa reminds us, you don't need a new marriage. You need to create a new chapter inside the one you already have. So if you're in midlife feeling disconnected from your partner or from yourself, this episode is your permission slip to reimagine what intimacy can look like now. So let's get into it.
I love it. I love all of those topics. Let's go.
There's so many things to talk about. Alisa and I were just together at an event, and the number one topic of the event amongst 100 women was sex, which actually kind of blew me away and surprised me. So let's start with, why does intimacy often shift so dramatically in midlife, especially in long-term relationships?
Well, a couple of factors. I know you talk about it so much here at the Well Drop. It's our hormones they're on a crazy roller coaster ride, right? They're going up and down. And what's not talked about is how much our men are also going through these hormonal fluctuations. So she's going through hormonal fluctuations, he is too. And those things often collide at the same time that our children no longer need us in the same capacity and our parents need us a whole lot more. And it is this perfect storm of desire bombs, just one after another, tanking our libido.
And I think always what's interesting that you mentioned the men too. I think no one thinks about the men's hormonal profile shifts. What exactly changes for men?
So well documented that men's testosterone starts decreasing as early as their 30s, but then it can also really plummet. They have different stressors in their 40s and 50s in the same way that we do. And so when their testosterone is going down, our estrogen is like, hey, see ya, we're just going to hijack the situation. You have those two things that really are at odds. And if you've spent the last 20 years, raising your children, being focused on career, you can find yourselves in that late 40s, early 50s going, who the heck are you? And why are we still in this relationship? And that's really where so many of those couples find themselves.
And so what is a first step that somebody should try to evaluate? Is it a sexual issue or a relationship issue? Because I think the lines get so blurred, it's confusing.
Well, I think, one is get your hormones tested, right? Be in this place of knowing your body. I know you're such an advocate for this, of like, how do we know our bodies? What's going on with us?
Yeah.
And it's not just women, right? We have to encourage our men. Go find out what's going on inside of you. Because one of the things that I don't think a lot of people know is that if a man starts to have trouble with having an erection, and so he might pull back sexually, is that those veins in the penis are some of the smallest. If he's having problems there, he might actually be in line to have bigger coronary problems and things like that. And so it's getting into this place of, can we look at the sexual health? But then we also do need to look at the relational health. What's been going on? How are we talking to each other? Are we spending time together? Do we still have fun together?
Yeah.
And bringing it back to what is that relational strength that we can rebuild?
I love how you and Tony talk about seasons of marriage. And I think it's an interesting perspective of how to frame the narrative. What does a sexual season look like for a couple in midlife? And how do they know what season they may be in?
Well, I think, starting in the late 30s and throughout the 40s, you start feeling, or maybe you've become aware because we've been talking about it so much now, that maybe things are just a little bit off. I don't have the same desire that I used to. But as women, we become so wrapped up in taking care of our kids and our careers and things like that, that we push a lot of that to the side until those kids grow up and they're not in our home and we're sitting there crying in the mirror going, what the heck is going on with me?
Yeah.
Right. And so stepping into this place of saying, this is a season where I need to get back in touch with who I am as a woman. I need to relearn myself. I need to rediscover my identity and my purpose. And those things drive a lot of relational strength.
Do you find that a lot of women, because in the perimenopause stage, your hormones are fluctuating up and down, it's kind of a crazy yo-yo of chaos.
Yes.
That I find a lot of women don't have the desire, which there are things you could do to help with that, but then they just sort of forget what pleasure feels like. Because I think if you know what pleasure is, why wouldn't you want pleasure and desire the pleasure? So what's kind of like the chicken or the egg?
Well, I think it comes back to something you said very early on in this episode where you talk about curiosity, right? And we need to get curious about our bodies again.
Yeah.
Our body at 45 is way different than it was at 25. What we enjoy, what does feel pleasurable to us, and even being able to share that information with our men. Because if they're still trying to, like I often joke with Tony, I'm like 2 centimeters in any one direction is the difference between a really great experience and one where I'm like, are we done yet?
Yeah.
And if our men don't know that and we're not communicating that to them, but coming back to that emotional piece, then they're literally flying blind. Right. And it can be such a frustrating experience for both men and women sexually because we're off, but we're not communicating what we're off
Right,
about.
like not being in sync. Yeah, so I guess communication would be probably number one. I think a lot of people have a hard time. I actually think before the communication, like you said, find out maybe what brings you pleasure and what you like, right? Would get that curiosity piece. And then the second part would be to communicate that. Because we never think about it in this frame, but we evolve our habits, we evolve wellness, career, as mothers, as people, but we really don't think about the sexual part of it. Like that's sort of just like it's like left in the dark. And you've been doing this a long time. Like how have you seen the conversation change over the years since starting your podcast, like 15 years ago?
Yeah. So we started a long time ago, back when people didn't even really know what podcasts were. And I think what I've seen over that period of time is people are becoming more comfortable talking about sex, talking about what's happening in their relationships, but there's still this challenge of how do I bring it up with my partner? And that's where, you doing an episode like this makes it an easier tool, an easier reach to say, hey, can we listen to this together? Because I think a lot of people still don't have the vocabulary to say, this is what I'm struggling with. I am struggling with my libido or my desire. And maybe it's my hormones, maybe it's your hormones, maybe it's we haven't talked in a really long time. And it can be very hard for a woman to want to be sexually intimate if she doesn't feel emotionally close.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem. A lot of women in midlife, they start to not feel seen. I think it's really hard for the men because if you're in a heterosexual relationship, they don't understand what a woman is going through hormonally because they probably didn't know each other during puberty times, but really midlife is puberty in reverse. I mean, it's intense for the woman and it's also intense for the partner in that relationship. And so I agree, like as an education tool to say, hey, this is like an us issue, not a me or you issue. Because I do think it's very heightened emotionally, this topic, right? People can like start to get offended and sensitive. So how, in your experience, can people remove the emotional component so nobody's feeling there's a blame game here?
I love leaning into curiosity, right? Most of us, like you said, we didn't have great conversations with mentors or role models or whatnot when it came to puberty. A lot of us just kind of figured it out, right? And now we're doing the same thing in reverse with the menopause, the andropause for the men. What does that look like? And so creating space where the two of you are talking about, like, what are the symptoms we're experiencing? And starting small, like, what are the little shifts that we can do? Hey, maybe this week we're just going to go on a 20-minute walk. get out of the house, get away from the kids if they're still home, and we're just going to go spend time with one another outside of our environment. Because sometimes it's just even the smallest environmental shifts and intentional time that start to rekindle the, oh, I like you.
Right. There's a reason why I married you.
Right.
or there's a reason we're together.
There's a reason we're together. But if we are so focused on all of the other things that we have to do and we don't put any time into this relationship or our sexuality in the relationship, it's very hard to get that spark turning into a flame again.
If you love diving into the latest wellness secrets on the podcast, then you're going to want to join my exclusive weekly newsletter. Get insider wellness tips you won't hear anywhere else. Be the first to know about my upcoming fasting workshops because let's be real, fasting is the secret weapon for surviving perimenopause. Access my weekly essentials, tools, and biohacks to help you thrive in midlife. I promise to make it worth your while, straight to the point, no fluff, just powerful tips to help you feel your best every single week. Don't miss out. Sign up now at thewelldrop.com. Let's take your wellness to the next level together. I think that's a great point. I'm always all about managing the calendar and putting yourself into the calendar, but I guess we also have to remember to put our relationship into the calendar too. Because I do see often, like you mentioned, like everyone can get busy being busy, right? You're raising the kids, you're working, you got your routine, and then all of a sudden when the kids leave the house, that's finally the door shuts and they look at each other. It's like, oh, why are we together? So in order to probably avoid that, hopefully down the road, you need to bake in some us time into that calendar. That can be those small moments because I guess those small moments, right, they probably build off of each other in time to create that connection, because that connection often gets lost. I think maybe it starts in the bedroom and then it might start to grow and grow. But it could also be from hormones. It's very complicated.
Right. There's no one single problem or one single cause. It's really looking at what's our dynamic. And to the point that you just made, we can do a lot more small steps than we can do the big ones. So it's much easier to go, hey, we're going to do a 15-minute conversation twice a week than to say, hey, we need to block off 3 hours to just talk. And everybody looks like deer in the headlights going, oh my gosh, that sounds so uncomfortable.
Horrible. Yeah.
But 15 minutes sitting out by a fire pit or walking along the beach, well, all of a sudden we start to get rid of the distractions and we get the opportunity to focus on one another again.
Do you hear common complaints amongst women of feeling exhausted? Like they're like, well, I have to like do everything. Why do I need to add this to my list?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I say to that is the two of you need to rediscover what works for you in the bedroom again, because it feels like one more thing on the to-do list. Well, who wants to do that? But coming back to this idea of if we know what brings us pleasure, if we know how to create pleasure between the two of us, well, that becomes something that we actually want to do instead of something we have to do. And, you know, if the orgasms start moving again, if we start getting into this place of, I know I'm going to be seen, I'm going to be heard in this encounter with him, then that is something that is so powerful. And yeah, we may have to start and then get into that place of, okay, now I'm feeling aroused, you know, spontaneous desire, get into there, but it can change a relationship so dramatically.
Because most clients that I work with, I always hear like, oh, it's Friday night, I know I need to. It's always the need, which actually makes me really sad because it's really like a chore on the to-do list. And so I can't imagine being in the act that is even like an enjoyable experience. But leaning into curiosity, like what is a way a woman can start to become curious? What does that even mean? What can they do?
Well, it's looking at asking the question first and foremost, who am I now? Like, I think sometimes we've worn all of these labels up until midlife. Maybe, you know, if you have children, you were mom. If you know, at whatever point in time you got married, you are wife, you were mother, maybe daughter, sister, like all of these different things. And going in midlife, I think we ask the question, who am I? And who do I want to be? And how does that woman want to show up, whether we're talking about in the relationship or in the bedroom? And what is that, you know, that knowing that starts to come of going, well, I want to be confident, or I want to know what pleasures me. And then it actually gives us the opportunity to go, well, the only way that's going to happen is if I learn what feels good to me, if I learn what brings me pleasure, instead of being, you know, with whatever mindset or that maybe you grew up with, that, you know, sex was dirty or sex was bad. It's like breaking free of that and going, no, sex is pretty amazing. And when we get it right, it feels really good. It has this incredible opportunity to connect us to one another.
And so for a woman who's trying to rediscover herself, because I think it's really hard in perimenopause, a lot of times your body may feel unrecognizable.
Yes.
You might be very moody. You're sort of become a little bit of a shell of yourself if you aren't as connected. What is a way a woman can kind of explore herself? What would be, a first step that you would guide somebody that you've seen to be successful?
I actually start with asking a woman which of her attributes she is still happy with or that makes her smile. Because I think as we move into our 40s and whatnot, we spend so much time frowning at ourselves
Too much.
in the mirrors. There's a reason all the frown lines come all over our faces. But to step into this place, is it your arms? Is it your eyes? Is it your smile? Like, what puts a smile on your face? And it may be really small. And I've had so many women minimize this just as I've worked with them. And I said, no. We start where it's small and it's doable. Because then they're like, okay, what else is going to put a smile on my face? What touches do I like? And, even being able to open that dialogue between partners. What touches are meaningful now? There was one thing to hold hands with, my husband's name is Tony, and to hold hands with him or to get that kiss on the forehead when we were first, dating and whatnot. But now it's like, okay, what touches make me feel secure, make me feel seen? And don't be afraid to experiment. And tell your partner, like, look, this is how this is going to go down. Like, I don't know right now, but I might ask you to give me a hug, or I might ask you to cuddle with me on the couch. And tomorrow it might be something completely different. Roll with me, because we're going to get there together. Coming back to it being a team.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was speaking to a sexologist who was saying that it was interesting for her. Most of her clients are actually men, and the men see her because they're trying to get the woman to be more into being sexual. So I think a woman hearing that, I think it's interesting. I think for sure we have so much negative self-talk. So I think that's beautiful to do something where you look at yourself and find something that makes you smile. And then maybe you put a Post-it note on your mirror to remind you, because we need those reminders. But that next step, it still feels like, why is it the woman's responsibility to create that curiosity? Like, how can we maybe have it, like, the guys are usually the ones who want to be probably more sexual than the women in general. It's a huge generalization. So how can we initiate for them to maybe get curious? Like, why do we need to be the curious ones first?
I don't think it's a we in terms of the women solely. Similarly, I've talked with many sexologists over the years, and it's true. A lot of men will be like, hey, fix the sex problem in my marriage.
Yes.
Right? Figure out what she needs to do, that type of thing. But a lot of times I will go back to the man and say, how does she like to be romanced now? What can you do that makes her feel seen and like you're listening, and really demonstrate that you're listening to her and you want to hear what she has to say, and it's not just like the Charlie Brown teacher going, wah, 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 right?
Yeah.
So getting into that place, because when I ask the romance question, so many people, both men and women, are like,
what's the answer?
I don't know how I want to be romanced. And here's the thing.
No one thinks about these things. Yeah.
Right. But if we're not talking about it, then Friday night does become one more thing on the to-do list, instead of maybe Friday rolls around and she gets this sweet little text or voice memo early in the day like, hey, it's been a long week and I can't wait to spend time with you today. I'm going to pick up dinner, or I've made the reservations and we're going to be ready to go at 7. And she's sitting there going, thank you, God.
Like, shock and awe.
don't
I want
have
to know
to
how
plan.
many people have that.
Right. Or
we are not conditioned for that.
we're not, and especially in long-term relationships. It's like, this is all the work that we did to get to the wedding, or to, initially in the relationship. And then it's like, well, I mean, my husband and I have been together for 31 years, married for 29.
Amazing. I think I'm coming on 18.
Yeah.
But we've been together probably almost 28,
Okay.
give or take.
Yeah. And so you're in that place. And so we have to step into this place of intentionality.
Yeah.
Right? Not just
It's a shift.
in taking care of our bodies during perimenopause, but what is the intentionality on both sides? And this is what I tell a lot of men. I'm like, look, she's not just going to like jump into bed and want to have sex with you if she has to do everything else and jump into bed and have sex with you. What does it look like for you to show up and tell her she's beautiful and take her out and have fun with her and hear what she has to say and really connect emotionally, so that she looks at you and she's like, that is somebody that I want to have sex with.
Now, is that hard for the men? Like, have you met that with resistance, or more confusion? Like, how do I even do that? What am I supposed to do?
Well, because nobody knows the answer to how do I want to be romanced, it is hard. Because if she says something, I mean, we've all seen the memes that talk about, the dish, like load the dishwasher. It's the way to my heart. Maybe in some marriages, not in mine. Dishwasher gets done. I mean, that's great, but that's not making me want to be sexual with you.
Yeah.
And so it's stepping back into this place of we have to get on both sides because he also has to be able to answer the question.
Yeah.
Think
about what his desires are too, I guess.
Right. Because it's not just, hey, I want to have sex with you. It's how do we connect? What is that intimacy that we're fostering and not making it be one more thing on the have to,
Yeah.
but one more thing on the want to. What does our relationship look like, especially a long-term relationship? What does it look like if we bring back a little bit of a spark? How excited do we get if we're looking forward to Friday or Saturday?
Right. Bring back a little bit of like playfulness and fun. Yes. Like everything maybe just shouldn't be so serious.
Well, and it doesn't take a whole lot. The two of you can go grab a coffee on a Saturday morning and just put the phones away, make eye contact, have a conversation.
Right. Like, how was your week?
How was your week?
Yeah.
How are you feeling about us?
Yeah, because I think this chapter, you're so in Groundhog's Day. I call it Groundhog's Day, right? You get up, get the kids ready, go, go, go. Like it is so go, go, go. Yes. And it's hard to pull back and realize like, hey, like have we checked in with each other? Like, have we even like done a date night? I mean, my husband and I think stopped doing date nights probably 2 years ago, which is crazy. But I don't even crave date night. Is that weird? Like, I'm kind of okay that we don't have date night. I actually rather be home with the kids and like chilling. Like, that's more nourishing to me than like going out. Because we are very social and I love to be social. So like my cozy comfort, and this is newer for me, is to be like, I'm so happy if we just stay home with the kids.
Well, and I think it's looking at how do we have a both and relationship. Both us being intentional as, man and woman together, what does that look like for the two of us? And what's our relationship with our children? And, I would say the four of us, because that's my dynamic. I've got 2 kids, husband and wife, but getting into that place, because if it's just about the kids, and that's a really cozy spot for my kids played sports. I was at all the games, things like that is so easy. But then we drop the marriage relationship. And those kids, as I know, because I've got a 20 and a 23-year-old, they grow up and they grow out of your house.
Yeah, you want to make sure you don't lose that connection so then it's not shock and awe when they leave the house. You've mentioned feeling seen a few times. What does that mean of a woman? Because I hear that a lot too, that they don't feel seen. What is happening in a relationship for somebody to not feel seen?
There's a lot of little actions that chip away at us feeling like people know who we are. Like we stop asking the questions about, hey, how are things at work? Or what's going on with family or friends or whatnot. We just kind of go through our routine motions. Time and time again, I hear from clients who are like, you know what, I don't even know if he knows what I like anymore, if he would know what my favorite coffee is, or and because it's become so easy just to put everything into a phone and, GPS it and Google Maps and ChatGPT, we've stopped having the dialogue. And there are so many women that would love to sit down on a couch just like this with no phones with their partner and be able to say, hi.
Yeah. I think the husbands or the men don't want to do that. I don't think so. I think they think in the chaos of midlife that women are a little annoying and needy, too chatty, like maybe because of their hormone profile, their tolerance. Like our tolerance is going down patience-wise, but theirs is too. Yeah. So how do we make it where they actually want to sit down on the couch and like talk?
So a couple of things. One is I love timers. And I think, whether you're setting a timer on your phone or kind of the old-fashioned egg timer, let's just have a conversation for 15 minutes.
Okay.
Everybody can manage that. Nobody is going to.
It's not a whole thing.
It's not a whole thing. And, when you do that, it's also using a tool like conversation cards or,
that's a good idea.
Question books. There are all different kinds available on Amazon or wherever. But having somebody else draft the question so you're not sitting there looking at your partner.
It feels awkward. I think someone listening right now would be like, no way.
I'm not doing that. But
the question cards that adds in the playfulness. I like that idea.
Absolutely. And I tell my clients, I'm like, okay, whoever draws the card, you have to answer the question first so you don't put somebody
else on the spot.
On the spot or,
Okay.
a gotcha. And, I remember years ago, Tony and I pulled out a deck and it was, what is your most vivid memory of your wedding? And, we both had completely different,
I'm
significant.
thinking of mine.
Right.
Yeah.
But you think about that, and that might not be a 5-minute conversation. The two of you might go past that 15 minutes because you're like, wait a minute, well, what about this? And
Yeah.
what happened here? And I can't believe that's what you thought. And it becomes this very comfortable, oh, okay, I'm getting to know you again. Like here we were in the hustle and bustle of that day and doing all the things. And
I think that's really fun. I think that's like a nice insert into maybe like the weekly routine, actually, that is not often thought about. Because I think people put too much pressure on just like the sexual aspect of it, but they forget the intimacy aspect. And intimacy doesn't need to mean sexual.
correct.
Right?
Right. I mean, I wrote a book called 6 Pillars of Intimacy, and the sexual intimacy is actually the last one that I talk about, emotional intimacy being the first one, because if we can get our conversations working, we can talk about money, we can talk about how to have fun together, we can talk about faith, we can talk about all of these other things, but we've got to practice the conversations. And most of us, especially over a long-term relationship, get out of practice because it's easier just to, nod ahead or say sure or fine or whatever, and we
Yes.
stop having the dialogue.
And I do think a lot of times when you're in a long-term relationship, it's just habit forming. You don't even realize you might be in that ritual routine of
Yes.
what's going on. So I think it's actually an interesting point to shake things up and like bring these like kind of tools in there to sort of like just rejigger things and kind of see what happens.
Right.
Like I'm going to try it. I haven't even done that. I can't wait to see my husband's reaction. He's like, "What are you talking about?" But I think sometimes maybe you need to do that just for fun, and it can be silly. You can make it feel stupid. Who cares? But
Right.
at least you'll probably get a good laugh out of it, regardless.
Well, I mean, all kinds of things. You might get a good laugh. You might stumble upon something that the two of you haven't talked about in a really long time. And it might, to be very honest, it might open a can of worms for some
Yeah.
couples. But on the other side of that is deeper emotional intimacy, which can lead to greater sexual intimacy. But we've got, because so many of us too, and this is something we haven't really touched on, is a lot of times too why the libido declines is there are these resentments,
Yeah.
disappointments, hurts that haven't been addressed, but they've been boxed up and put into our lives. And when our hormones start doing their little happy dance in perimenopause, all of that gets stirred up.
Right. It's a good point because I think a lot for women, especially, estrogen is sort of our patience hormone. So as that goes down, women all of a sudden become less patient. And then I actually find both for men and women that the 40s, and a therapist would have to confirm this is just what I'm seeing, that past traumas, childhood traumas start to rear their ugly head. And if you can kind of like choose your path to either deal with it or not deal with it, and then that of course is going to affect the relationship because the person might be like, where did this come from?
Right.
And you don't even know maybe as a person, depending on your awareness level of like, oh, because you start connecting those dots of why you behave a certain way, why
Yeah.
you do a certain thing, why you're becoming more sensitive. Because when the hormones, right, are lowering, you can be more sensitive and things can trigger you in a different way. And I think a big part of overarching just wellness as a lifestyle, this relationship wellness is a huge pillar that is often just completely left out of the conversation until today.
Well, because we're so focused on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
If I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, oh, I'm bloated and my emotions are all over the place and, the brain fog is really thick and all of these things are going on, I'm not thinking about the impact
No.
on my part. I am singularly focused on how do I get through the next 24 hours. And in our marriage, I knew it had hit ahead when Tony woke up one morning and he's like, you've got to figure this out because you must have had a night sweat last night. You got really mad and you hauled off and decked me in the middle of the night. And that's when I realized how much my own journey was impacting the us journey. And that I had to do something or we could easily track to become a statistic.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I mean, a horrible statistic is that highest rates of divorce are between 45 and 55, initiated by the woman, which I thought is so interesting. I would have thought it would have been maybe the guy, but it's not. It's the woman because you start to just like have no tolerance for things, I suppose. And how do you, in your work with women to sort of like pull it back if they're ready to just walk out that door for them to, because maybe it's not a relationship problem, but it's just a communication problem.
Yeah.
How do you get them to sort of like open that door?
It's about uncovering what the real root is, right? It's so easy to be like, oh, we just, the irreconcilable differences, that phrase from, a million moons ago. It's easy to just label that to all the challenges we're having. But if you start to look for the patterns, like, are we fighting about the same thing all the time? And why haven't we resolved that? Are there hurts that I've never brought up to him that I am just repeating like a hamster wheel in my head, and he has no idea? I'm just like cranky all the time. Then we start looking at what are the relational aspects. I've told many people over the years, I'm like, if you're in an abusive relationship, if there's addiction, absolutely you've got to get safe. If it's relational and neither one of you have really been putting a lot into investing in the relationship, then before you decide to pull the plug, we actually need to see what you can both do if you're intentional about the relationship.
And what would be a good resource for somebody? Because I find the word therapy, for some reason, people, it could be a trigger for some people, and they want to like run away. I don't need a therapist.
Oh, yeah.
They don't like that. So what would be a good source of support for somebody to look for? Is it a coach?
I think most people are finding themselves moving towards coaching or marriage strategy, being in that place of saying, you know what, I don't want to deal with the childhood traumas. I don't think I have any, or it's 2025, right? A lot of people have already been in therapy. They've done that. They've worked through their stuff, but we're missing the strategy. We're missing the coaching on this. And that's where finding somebody that's going to be like, where are you today? Where do you want to go? Where are the gaps? And what tools do you need? Because what I find, and especially for a lot of men, if they can understand where the tools are or what the tools are and where the gaps are, they'll implement.
Yeah.
And women just need to know that there's support and strategy. And so we can bring that all together, and we're not just flying blindly talking about our feelings every week, then they can actually start to make that forward progress.
I like that. It's like an action plan. Because I agree.
100%.
I think it's maybe in the past therapy is like off-putting because it's just kind of like this like download, but then no action plan followed. So people just like leave feeling empty and not satisfied. There's no results.
Yeah. Then they get in the car and they complain and fight and sit in
same
silent.
thing.
And it's the same thing. And then they come back, in a week or two and they do it over again. And that's where even in my own coaching, I took a very action-oriented approach. I'm like, I do not leave my clients at the end of a session without at least, 2 or 3 action items that I'm going to ask them about. Because I find if they take action in between sessions, they can start to get a little bit of momentum. And that feels very encouraging.
Right. And then it probably just builds upon itself. And then do you find that people are surprised? Like give us an example of a success story that you've had with one of your clients.
So interestingly enough, when we were in DC, I have clients who also live in DC. So we were there for that event and I had reached out to them. And this is a couple that when I first met them 8 years ago, they very clearly on the verge of divorce, just 2 totally different personalities, bickered all the time. And so for them, learning how to communicate with one another, learning how to deal with her high energy and his more kind of mild-mannered approach, having those conversations, using tools like the conversation cards and things like that to bridge in smaller chunks. We had coffee with them while we were there, and they looked over at Tony and they just said, you know what, she saved our marriage.
Oh,
If it hadn't been for the tools,
yeah,
we might not be sitting here having coffee with you guys today.
I love that. That's amazing. Where can people find you, Alisa?
Well, everything that we do is at oneextraordinarymarriage.com. Our books, resources, coaching, podcast, it's all there.
What are some rituals or micro habits that couples can start today to help build awareness and connection?
So one of my most favorite ones to suggest is a couple doing what's called a walk and talk. Right? We're so used to having conversations sitting on the couch or around the dining room table. But it's been proven time and time again that when we get out and we're moving, and we've got that kinetic energy, and we're not staring into one another's eyes, it actually changes the relational dynamic, and you can get out and you can be more vulnerable when you are side by side. And it lowers the fear response. It lowers conflict and tension. You can still bring up the topics, but it's not nearly as intimidating.
I love that. Actually, it's so funny because my husband and I go for like morning and evening walks together.
I love that.
And everyone in the neighborhood like knows it. Like it's our dog walk time. And Yeah, I really crave it. I think I didn't we didn't even intend for it to be what it's become, but it's something that we've done in the last 5 years. And I think it's such a nice way to catch up, talking about catching up on your day. Because in that hamster wheel, sometimes you can just forget to say how was your day? Unless you kind of get yourself outside of the house. So I think having a pet actually for me would be something I would recommend everyone to have, because it forces you to get outside. My kids don't really love to walk the dog, so it's become our thing
It's
that
your
we
thing.
do.
Yeah. And again, you said it. You're away from the distractions. You're out of the home, that kind of boxed environment.
Yeah.
And you don't have to talk the whole time. You can just be.
Yeah.
And sometimes just rekindling the spark is being in one another's presence.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's so like you were saying, sometimes the things that are most effective are the most simple.
Yes.
But we just forget. It doesn't need to be complicated.
We're better off if it's not complicated.
That's what works. And also probably consistency, right? You find that routine that works for you and make sure you remain consistent, because then you probably can reap the benefits of that.
Definitely.
And so I always love to close out my conversations by saying, what is it one drop of wellness wisdom you like to leave with our audience today?
Be intentional and take action, right? Find one thing in this conversation that resonated with you and commit to doing it. And start with a week, right? How can you be intentional every day for this next week, taking action in your relationship?
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us on the Well Drop, Alisa. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.